The State Department is facing new questions over Rudy Giuliani and Ukraine as fallout continues from the whistleblower complaint. President Trump's personal lawyers mentioned at least 31 times in the report. Giuliani claims the State Department asked him to meet with Ukrainian officials to get dirt on former Vice President Joe Biden.
The whistleblower falsely alleges that I was operating on my own. Well, I wasn't operating on my own. I went to meet Mr. Zelensky's aide at the request of the State Department. 15 memos make that clear.
Is your relationship with Pompeo good? Are you guys good? Because Maggie Haberman, who apparently knows everything at the New York Times,
right,
she said that Pompeo is unhappy with you. Is that true? I know both of you. I haven't heard about this except from Maggie Haberman.
I actually think they should all congratulate me, because if it weren't for me, nobody would have uncovered and faced massive corruption by the Vice President of the United States. In fact, I'm a legitimate whistleblower.
He also told The Atlantic he's the real hero of this story. Let's remind you that Rudy Giuliani is the president's personal attorney. He represents the president's personal interests, not the interests of the United States government. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is defending his department, although he didn't specifically address Giuliani's claim.
To the best of my knowledge, and from what I've seen so far, each of the actions that were undertaken by State Department officials was entirely appropriate and consistent with the objective that we've had, certainly since this new government has come into office. We have tried to use this opportunity to create a better relationship between the United States and Ukraine, to build on the opportunities to tighten our relationship, to help end corruption in Ukraine. This is what President Zelensky ran on. We're hopeful that we can help him execute and achieve that.
All right, CBS News State Department and Foreign Affairs reporter Christina Ruffini is here to walk us through the latest. Good to see you.
Close enough. Hey, Bob. Nice to be here.
I know you, Ruffini.
It's been a long week for all of us. It's been a long week.
Happy Friday.
You too.
Okay. So I thought that that soundbite from Secretary of State Pompeo was interesting. He says activities undertaken by State Department officials.
Right.
Rudy Giuliani is not a State Department official.
He is not.
He works for the president as his personal attorney. Now, the president may believe that the immense foreign policy and diplomatic skills that Rudy Giuliani has are as an asset to him, and that's perhaps why he sent him to Ukraine. But what is the State Department saying about Rudy Giuliani's activities abroad?
So the secretary was asked the first part of that question. We heard the response, but the first part of the question he was asked yesterday was basically, did you send Giuliani to Ukraine? He hasn't quite answered that part of the question. Now, the State Department sent me a statement that said, Mr. Giuliani is a private citizen. He does not represent the U.S. government. And it was, in fact, Ukrainian officials who asked the envoy to Ukraine, Kurt Volker, to put them in touch with Rudy Giuliani. And that's, that's that. But no one has really, at least to my satisfaction, addressed whether or not, Giuliani says he was doing this at the behest of the U.S. government, possibly the State Department, definitely the president. The State Department says, no, he's a private citizen. Those two things are, they can't exist together. One of them is not true, and we need to get that reconciled, and we need a clear statement from someone in leadership.
And, the president and president's pass are well within the executive authority to send anybody that they want to talk to whomever they want, at any time, right? But in this specific case, I guess the question is, was Giuliani operating directly at the behest of the president, or was it the state? Was it the apparatus of the U.S. government that was backing him?
And was he operating in line step with the actual officials who work there? Because one of the reasons we have this thing called the Logan Act, right, which makes it illegal for private citizens to negotiate on behalf of the U.S. government without permission, is because at one point we were trying to negotiate with Paris. We had like 5 different guys, and this guy named Logan went over and said, no. I got the deal, I'll really negotiate. And it blew up all the negotiations. So you don't want a fly in the ointment. You want to make sure everybody is on the same page. Diplomacy and foreign policy is incredibly complicated. And the last thing you need is someone coming in and going rogue, which is why it's actually illegal, unless he had permission and unless he wasn't doing anything, that controversial if the president asked him to go over and work on something. But it is controversial, and it could be a potential Logan Act violation. And it could be a lot of other things, which is why we need to get to the bottom of who sent him there.
All right, Christina, let's talk about the reporting, the story that you broke yesterday that went viral on social media. A lot of people were talking about it. You reported that the counselor to the secretary, Ulrich Breckbuhl, was not on that phone call between President Trump and the Ukrainian President Zelensky, despite being named on that whistleblower complaint. Why is this significant?
It depends on who you ask if it's significant. Like the camp who is supportive of the president is going to say, look, this goes to credibility, right? This is a very basic fact in this whistleblower complaint. If this is true and he wasn't on this call, which he seems to have not been based on a U.S. government source who tells me they have direct knowledge of him not being on the call, this is just, they're just going to pick away at this. This isn't true, this isn't true, this isn't true, and it undercuts his credibility. On the other hand, you have people who are going to say, okay, you can't tear apart this entire report because one minute fact was wrong. It's like if you're reading an entire story and one little part is wrong, doesn't mean the entire story overall is wrong. It just means there's a fact error. So I think we'll have to see as this comes out whether or not they can pick apart more of these bullet points in this whistleblower report and how much they can take down and whether or not that impacts its credibility on the Hill.
All right, let me ask you about another question that a lot of people have questions about. Do we know why military aid was held up? Because Congress and the Defense Department seem to be satisfied with the progress that Ukraine was making on corruption up until that point. So do we have an answer as to why that money was held up?
There has not been a satisfactory answer. What we've heard from the administration is corruption. We were waiting for corruption. We needed them to clean up their act. But now we have this letter from the DOD that says actually they'd made pretty good progress. And members of Congress have said, yeah, they were okay with it. So it's still not exactly clear why that aid was held up. The other issue that's so ironic in all of this is President Zelensky, when we talked about this on Monday, when I was there for the election, everything we heard from voters is the reason he won, the reason he got voted into office is because people are sick of the corruption. People don't want it. It's a constant problem in Ukraine. Ukrainian politicians are thought of as very corrupt. So now we have this corruption scandal about trying to root up corruption, and it's just the irony is, I don't even know where to start.
I mean, because one might reason that if the president of the United States wanted to call the president of Ukraine to talk about corruption, given the corruption that's endemic in Ukraine in years past, there would be a list of things to consider other than your main political rival who's polling ahead of you.
Right. That feels very Soviet and very old Ukraine and the exact kind of thing that the new Ukraine is trying to get away from. And this is an ally who has said, we're here to help you in this battle. We're here to root out corruption. Look at us. Look at our democracy. We'll take you down this path. And then you have a phone call that, depending on how you interpret it, can seem to be the very old school kind of corrupt politics that the country is trying to get away from.
And the president has often called out former President Obama for letting that happen under his watch, but it hasn't changed under President Trump's watch.
It hasn't, but it is much harder to get someone to get out of a territory than to prevent them to hold it, right? Once they're there, they've been there since, I think it's 2014 now, right?
Yeah.
So they've held their own elections and they've put up a fairly standard checkpoint and border wall. So Ukraine still wants them out. The people still generally think that that's their territory, but that's also a very pro-Russian part of the country, and it's a lot of ethnic Russians there as well. So I think it's going to be hard to get that back if they ever get it back at this point. They might just have to, move on.
Will we ever get you back here in New York?
I hope so, Vlad.
That's always good to have you
Maybe
here.
not for UN Week. I'm going to go back to DC and sleep. I hope that's okay.
Cristina Ruffini, thank you very much as always. We appreciate it.